the darkness of her royal chamber of wood, the Queen Carpenter ant rests upside down, while her minions clean themselves and keep watch. The ants were still new to this strange yet cozy grand wooden palace, unlike anything the colony had ever lived in before. They were vigilant and resting now, for they had much work ahead of them. Getting to this point was an incredible journey, and I'm excited to share with you all today the story of one of the coolest ant farms I've ever built for some of the coolest ants I've ever owned. Welcome to the AntsCanada Ant Channel. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC family. Enjoy. It's been an amazing 3 months, AC family. From the moment we caught the pregnant Carpenter ant queens during their mating nuptial flight, placed them in test tube setups, watched them raise their first generation of workers, and finally moved 2 lucky Carpenter ant colonies from the bunch into their first wooden ant farms 2 weeks ago. Finally coming to the amazing thing I can't wait to show you today. Now, I didn't upload last week, but a lot has happened since our last video. So I have lots of things to share with you guys, including some shocking information I learned from my ant biologist friend, Dr. General, when I asked him to have a look at the Carpenter ants we've been raising, in attempts to finally identify their exact species. Without spoiling the surprise, guys, remember how we suspected this Carpenter ant colony, colony number 7, was a different species from the others we were raising? Well, have I got a mind-blowing plot twist for you? I'll also be revealing the official names of our 2 Carpenter ant colonies in their ant farms that your AntsCanada and I have chosen based on all your name suggestions you guys gave in my last video. So stay tuned for all that coming up. So let's get to it. First things first, 2 weeks ago, I moved 2 chosen Carpenter ant colonies, whom up to today, we've been calling colony number 1 and colony number 7 into their luxury modified AC ant towers from AntsCanada.com. In the area where we ant keepers would normally add soil or sand for the ants to dig, I decided to outfit the ant towers with a cylinder of wood for our Carpenter ants to dig and tunnel into. Now, as we all know, Carpenter ants are notorious for nesting in wooden structures, often in domestic spaces like the cottage I'm currently living in, where Carpenter ants seem super rampant. And it was a personal dream of mine to finally own an ant farm with Carpenter ants, where the ants had the ability to dig tunnels into the wood. Formerly, I had kept Carpenter ants in ant farms with pre-made tunnels, which is fun, but the idea of allowing the ants to tunnel through wood themselves, as they would in the wild, was just super exciting to me. I wanted to replicate this natural nesting environment for our Carpenter ants. So, I created a small starting burrow to give the ants a good head start. That is where we last left off, guys. But AC family, what happened after the ants were given their wooden ant towers certainly wasn't what I expected at all. For nearly a week, I watched as the ants sort of scoped out the starting burrows, but there was just no interest in digging into the wood. I was really hoping the colony would start burrowing, but then several of you had some very insightful comments in my last video. Sergio Martinez wrote, "As an exterminator, ants always start colonies in moistened, damaged, soft wood, then start expanding into sound wood." Dwarf Gorami wrote, "Ants almost never carve their nest into fresh wood. It's really hard and it takes long. I suggest trying rotten or at least a very soft type of wood. They like that. If you put wood in water for a long time, it will be soft." Even the president of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, an avid AC family member, wrote, "These types of ants require soft, rotting wood to burrow and dig. They won't be able to dig in that." When I read this, I thought to myself, of course, duh. If I left the wooden ant farms as they were, the ants would probably never move into the wood. I needed to help them out, and I had the perfect idea. Here's what I did. I removed the wooden cylinder from one of the ant towers. Surprisingly, moisture from the air was already starting to rot the wood. I could see dark mold spots already starting to attack the wood, but I needed to make this block of wood suitable for the Carpenter ants to move in. So I went straight to work, With a power drill, I drilled out holes and tunnels into the wood, trying my best to imagine how our carpenter ants might like to design their home had they been the architects. I worked for a good hour and a half to make sure what I was creating for our ants would be perfect. Funny enough, drilling into the wood like this was giving me flashbacks of when I first started my ant shop, AntsCanada.com, in my parents' basement in Canada 12 years ago. I had drilled and fashioned thousands of ant farms like this. Back then, it was into pumice stone, which I sold online to ant keepers around the world who were just as passionate about ants as me. As I drilled and created a flurry of a mess, I was taken back to those pioneering days of AntsCanada.com and realized that in just 12 years, my dream of promoting the ant-keeping hobby had truly come true, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Nostalgic, emo, and grateful. That's how I felt, drilling into this wood for our ants. I proceeded to wash the wood of its remaining little bits, just like old times, when I used to make the AC ant farms by hand. AC family, behold, the wooden cylinder with new chambers and tunnels. It kind of looks like a face. It's a small network of tunnels and chambers, and I'll show you around in just a moment. I decided not to sand the edges to keep them rough, to hopefully encourage the ants to smoothen things out and pull at the little fibers. But let's start with the entrance. Here's where the ants will be able to enter the nest. It's big enough to fit the queen, but small enough to make the ants feel protected. Here's what I call the atrium, where the ants can choose to go either left or right. To the right, we have a sizable chamber here. Not sure if the queen would like this spot, but my guess is they'd be placing brood or stored food here if ever. To the left, a major corridor, which leads to the other areas of the nest. The ants could then proceed to the mid-level portion of the nest, another large communal chamber here. And at the extreme left, this tighter dead-end area. Now I created this dead-end area because my hopes were that the ants would continue this tunnel whenever they were ready to expand the nest. In theory, and in my mind, it was an ideal place for the ants to continue burrowing, but only time would tell. Moving on to the lower chambers of the nest now, we have this large chamber here for the ants. And though to us it looks like a dead end, it's actually not. It leads to this chamber here, a spacious chamber that I also feel will be the most humid part of the nest. The secret is it's connected by a tunnel at the back, but from the front we can't see the connection. It's just a cool design feature I used to incorporate into the old AC pumice nests that I called shadow tunnels. And that was it. This was the wooden palace I hoped our carpenter ants would like. I wasn't sure if they would, but we would soon find out. I placed the entire wooden cylinder into a container of water and allowed the wood to soak overnight. Now I had only created one modified wood nest for now, because I wanted to see if the idea would work. No pun intended. Get it? Woodwork? But I randomly chose Colony 7 to receive the new wood nest for now. I placed the now moistened wood into the AC ant tower. I made sure to place the nest entrance hole I made right at the port, where I'd be reconnecting the ant colony, in order to increase the chances of the ants discovering the hole leading to the chambers. Let's hope one ant will be curious enough to wander in and discover the darkened nest below. The red film, by the way, fools the ants into thinking they are in the dark because it is said that ants cannot see red light. So we'll be able to see them, but to the ants, it will be dark, just the way they like it. Alright, AC family, let's do this! It was time to introduce this new wooden palace to our carpenter ants. I placed the lid back onto the ant tower, then reconnected Carpenter Ant Colony 7 to the port. Connected. Let's watch. At first the ants seemed shy and wary. What is this? It smells different. Another ant came by and decided to climb up and onto the wood. And oh, it looks like an ant is about to explore our hole. Nope, not yet, but close. Now it was just a waiting game. I wondered how long it would take for the ants to discover the secret lair we made them, deep in the wood. At one point my heart stopped when I spotted an ant crawl into the atrium. Yes, But it crawled out not too shortly after, and carried on with its day as if it had found nothing exciting. Aw, man. Back at the nest, the colony seemed pretty active as the workers were busy rearranging the brood. It didn't look like moving out was on this colony's mind just yet. It was okay though. I was willing to wait, and I wasn't going to force the ants to move. I would just have to work with and accept the ants' moving schedule and preferences. I needed to accept the possibility that the ants might not find our wooden ant farm a desirable nest to live in. Obviously, I hoped this wasn't the case. For a whole day, I watched Colony 7 moving around in their test tube, not interested in our wooden nest. I didn't know what I was going to do if the ants didn't end up liking this wood nest that I spent a long time creating for them. Should I just try to house them in another ant farm setup? Perhaps with pre-made tunnels like I've always done for Carpenter ants in the past? I was a bit concerned because the cotton blocking the colony's water reservoir in their test tube was already beginning to show signs of mold, so I knew I needed to come up with alternate housing plans soon if they ended up not moving into this wooden ant tower. But then, AC family, just as I was starting to doubt our wooden ant farm idea, I began to notice ants were wandering and hanging out at the test tube adapter joint, attaching the test tube to the port. But what caught me by surprise was an ant carrying brood into this area. Whoa! Wait, what? Were the ants relocating the brood from the test tube? OMG, yes! The ants were moving the brood out of the test tube. This was a good sign because it meant that the ants were possibly finding this spot to be a better nest area for the babies, just a skip and a hop away from our wooden nest in the ant tower. How exciting! I felt the ants were probably turned off by the bright lights I was using for filming, and thus began moving the babies into the shadows. Using light is a common way ant keepers get ants to relocate a colony. Don't worry though, this light emits no heat, so the ants weren't moving due to being cooked by light, which can be dangerous. I continued to keep the light in place to encourage the ants to move closer and closer to our wooden nest. It was at this time that I could also truly appreciate how much brood Colony 7 had now. Check out that naked pupa, which we already mentioned in a previous video, makes this Carpenter ant colony unique because Carpenter ants typically have cocooned pupae, as seen in our other Carpenter ant colonies. Before long, the royal queen herself had relocated with the rest of the workers. I wasn't sure what to make of this. Though the colony was relocating out of their test tube and into the test tube adapter area, they still weren't showing signs of wanting to explore the inside of the wooden nest. A guard stood at the entrance to make sure the queen and colony were protected, but none were seen entering the hole. Would the queen and the whole colony just live in this section from now on? I wasn't quite sure what to do exactly. But AC family, you guys won't believe the thing that happened next. So eventually I had to leave the colony and use the restroom, and I was literally gone for 5 minutes and came back to this. The ants were no longer in the test tube adapter. Had they moved back into the test tube? No. I looked at the AC ant tower and held my breath. OMG, the colony had moved in. Seeing the queen and the brood inside was the best sight ever. I couldn't believe I was only gone for 5 minutes and they had moved in that time period. That was some fast transport. Seeing the colony inside our wood nest was truly a dream come true. But I didn't want to remove the red film to look at them closer. Until the ants had more time to settle in, I wanted the ants to fall in love with the space and feel safe there. So I decided to leave the colony alone for 24 hours to enjoy their brand new home. What a dream come true! In 24 hours, I disconnected the test tube and placed an AC plug into the port. It was so weird to see the test tube setup completely evacuated. This test tube had been the home to the ant colony for their entire existence, and it was now an empty glass shell. It had served its purpose well, but it was the start of a new age now for this ant colony, where they no longer needed to live in the glass and cotton home of their provenance, but in the very element that nature had designed them to live: wood. I removed the red film check them out. Boy, is it moist in there. It was awesome to see the ants living in the wood. Check out the dead end. Guess they decided it would be the best place to stock brood piles. The workers were busy performing various activities inside the wood nest. As for the queen, she really liked this area. The workers have placed some of the brood in this chamber and have yet to utilize the end chamber connected via the shadow tunnel. Seeing all this was truly amazing, and again, such a dream come true, because I've always wanted to raise carpenter ants in a wooden nest like this. Seeing how moist and hydrated the whole nest was made me realize how awesome of a material wood is for ants to adapt as a nest material. I'll probably not have to water this nest for a few weeks until it dries out. I also noticed how ingenious the wood was for nesting, as it offered a dry area towards the top and a moist area towards the bottom, allowing the ants to hydro-regulate and choose what and who goes where in the nest, according to moisture conditions. Let's hope that one day they'll continue to burrow and expand this nest as the colony grows larger. Now AC family, at the start of this video, I promised two things. First off, species ID. So as mentioned, I was finally able to ask my ant biologist friend, Dr. General, to have a look at our videos and help with a species ID. And what he had to reveal was truly shocking. First, he said that we won't be able to determine the exact species of our carpenter ants until the first majors arrive. Majors are the extra large worker ants with huge heads that specialize in defense and cutting things open. Right now, the colony is composed of nanitics, so it will be some time before majors start appearing. But one mind-blowing thing he revealed to me was about Colony 7. AC family, listen to this. So remember how Colony 7 always produced naked pupae, and we could never figure out why? Well, turns out Colony 7 is not from the well-known carpenter ant genus Camponotus. In 2016, ant biologists determined through DNA evidence that a certain collection of carpenter ants were in fact biologically different enough from Camponotus carpenter ants to be lumped together in their own genus, known today as Colobopsis. Colony 7 is a Colobopsis species, not a Camponotus species. And one such difference between Colobopsis and Camponotus is that Colobopsis ants produce naked pupae. So that's why. What's amazing is Colobopsis and Camponotus ants have both evolved to live in wood and kind of grew similar in appearance due to convergent evolution, meaning they evolved the same general body shape, parts, and behavior, simply due to living in the same environments. This is why Colony 7 looks so much like the other carpenter ants, but technically is a completely different genus. What's even cooler is that some Colobopsis species have workers with these crazy truncated heads that are used like doors to block the entrances to their nests. Insane! Not sure if Colony 7 will develop workers with such heads, but only time will tell. I also learned that since Colobopsis ants pretty much share the same lifestyle as Camponotus ants, they too are given the common name carpenter ants, but are just a different and new genus of carpenter ants, scientifically speaking. Now AC family, isn't that all just super cool? Now as for the official name, your AC Senate and I looked through all your awesome suggestions, and we all agreed that Colony 7 should from now on be called the Redwood Warriors. So many of you suggested this name, or variations of it. So it's official. This Colobopsis carpenter ant colony will be called the Redwood Warriors. Here is their official flag. As for Colony 1, our Camponotus carpenter ants, your AC Senate and I looked through your name suggestions and decided that they will forever be named the Ebony Army, and this is their flag. They will be moving into their wooden ant tower shortly, now that I know the Redwood Warriors really like living in theirs. Overall, AC family, this has been an extremely rewarding journey of ant discovery with you all, and the fun has only just begun. My dream when I first started this ant channel was to show anyone who would stop to watch and listen just how amazing these miraculous creatures, who most of the world sees as pests that need to be exterminated, actually are if you just take the time to look closely. I'll have you know that dream of mine comes true every week. when I see how many of you are invested in the lives of the ants we care for together on the channel. Thank you all for joining me and for subscribing to the channel, AC family. I cannot thank you enough. The entire experience taught me that all great things in life start small, take time, and with some patience and love, grow into something unexpectedly rewarding beyond our wildest of dreams. Thank you all for watching and supporting the ants. Until next week, AC family, it's Ant Love forever.